Hi, my name is Kate Flannery from UL Bowes, and you are watching the Her Sport Energia AIL show, sponsored by Energia. Think of the possibilities.
Hi, I'm Niamh Tallon, and I am delighted to be joined by Hannah Tyrrell today as we dive into all of the action. Today we'll be talking about the performance of Irish rugby stars in the Celtic Challenge, the action in round 12 and 13 of the Energia AIL, and we'll look forward to round 14, the short-lived appointment of a new director in Fiji after homophobic comments, and the launch of a new professional women's rugby league over in the United States, and more. So Hannah, we're first going to dive into the Celtic Challenge, where the Irish Wolfhounds and Clovers are standing top of the table, having only experienced one loss each. We have the Wolfhounds with 29 points after 7 games, and we have the Clovers with 25 points playing 6 games. So we're more than halfway now so far. What do you think of the performances from the Irish team so far?
Yeah, look, I don't think we could have too many complaints, to be honest. We've 2 teams in the competition. They're 1 and 2 in the table, and are in a very favourable position heading down the stretch. I think it's been a really valuable competition for a lot of young girls who maybe are getting their first taste of a step up above maybe club and interprovincial level. And there's been a couple of kind of superstars, the likes of Eimear Considine, Aaron King and co, all stepping up and trying to get a jersey, I suppose, for the Six Nations. So I think the standard probably of the Celtic Challenge and from the opposition probably hasn't been what we would have liked to really give a better sense of where we're at in Irish rugby. But the girls can only play against the teams they're put up against, and we've put in some really good performances and learned a couple of valuable lessons, and so hopefully that'll stand to them, and those who go on to play in the Six Nations can make a huge difference.
You mentioned Eimear Considine, formerly Murphy Crowe there already, who got 2 tries, and Tyrrell also got 2 tries when the Clovers faced Glasgow Warriors on Sunday. They were joined by Anne McGann, Emily Lane and Maeve Deely in scoring tries as well, so a really, really strong performance. How good is it to see Anna McGann and Tyrrell back in flying form, back on the pitch? They've obviously come back from injuries over the last few months and years, so talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Look, not just any injury, but the dreaded ACL, unfortunately, which is a long solitary rehab, which doesn't always go the way you want, and it can be very hard when you're kind of slogging out your rehab on the sidelines and watching everyone else get to play good rugby, wondering will you ever get back out there. And it's brilliant. It's great to see, Derv, obviously we know the potential that she has every time she plays for Old Belvedere or Munster or Ireland. She puts in a brilliant performance, and she'll be such a huge addition to the Six Nations and for Ireland in what's going to be a big year. And she's really tenacious, and that back row with that Irish team is going to be very, very hard to get a spot in, and she's right up there. Anna the same, has played a number of different positions, obviously kind of in and out of the sevens as well. So for her, she's kind of given us more options in that centre partnership that we've probably been looking for. She's very, very strong and robust, has a brilliant handoff, it's great. It's great for us to be scoring tries, playing loads of rugby, and anytime we can move the ball to Eimear, I nearly said Murphy Crowe there, it's a habit. Anytime you can move the ball to Eimear Considine, get her scoring tries and in good form, you've always a chance.
We've seen a few name changes over the last couple of years. That certainly makes our job a little bit harder. I know, and when Lucy Mulhall got married as well, she changed it to Lucy Rock, and people are like, is there a new person in the squad? What's the story there? But look, Eimear obviously always making a huge impact, whether she's playing 15s or 7s. On the other hand, we have Wolfhounds facing Galway Lightning, where Wolfhounds got the win. We had Katie Whelan, we had Maeve Flanagan, Katie Corrigan all scoring tries. But let's talk about Dannah O'Brien. She had 3 conversions, and the 21-year-old already has 41 Six Nations conversions. So we know her strengths. What else are you looking forward to seeing from Dannah in this competition, and then are you looking forward to the Six Nations in a couple of weeks?
Look, I think I've been probably a big fan of Dannah's over the last number of years, and people are probably sick of me talking about her, but I just think she's a player who's always had brilliant confidence. 10 is a very hard position to play, and it's probably been a gap Ireland have struggled to fill over the last number of years, and she's kind of stepped in there. It hasn't been without struggles, but her confidence and her ability to make line breaks, but also her kicking. Having a left boot in a team genuinely makes such a difference. And it's a great battle there between herself and the resurgence of Nicole Fowley at 10 as well. So I think that's also pushing her to be a little bit better. The experience of Nicole is probably off pitch teaching her an awful lot, and then they're pushing each other to be better. But we know all about her kicking with so much more to her game. You know, she's got huge strength. Her dummy is something to behold. She manages to, like Aoife Wafer, fake everyone out every single time. But just making the right options. For me, I think for her to continue to improve and to become that kind of elite 10 that we would hope she can. Again, you have to remember she's only 21, still very, very young. Continue to make those good decisions with ball in hand, you know when to and where to play the game in the right positions on the pitch. And trying to keep that confidence. You know, you do need that little bit of confidence regardless of how the game is going, to be able to boss your forwards and then kind of move the ball to your playmakers out the back and make things happen. But no, look, I've always been very impressed by her. And as I said, keep putting in those good performances and it'll only help herself and help Ireland.
Yeah, it's funny. I do feel like we've been talking about her for a couple of years.
She's been around ages, but she's still so young. Like it's so nice to see, because we'll see her develop. As a player, and as I said, 21 years of age. She's nowhere near hit her potential or her peak just yet. So it's exciting to see the prospect down the line.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting, because I genuinely do feel like we've been talking about it for a long time. And then when I saw earlier on that we're talking about the fact she's only 21, I was like, wow, like she has, been knocking around. I suppose with that, like, do you think that you're seeing more confidence and development in her as she has come through maybe in the last few years? Do you think that she'll get more confidence with that kind of age? I say lightly, because as you said, only 21, and is it something that we can be excited about maybe as she matures, like as we look towards like maybe 25, 26, 27, and the impact that she could make then? And another young player that's obviously a superstar from the Irish perspective is Aoife Wafer, which you mentioned too. So I guess it's a really interesting place that we're in with young players coming through.
100%, and we'll see it with the Six Nations. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but definitely with Dannah and all these other young players, just being in international setups, high performance setups that they now are almost on a full-time basis, all that learning that they're happening, that they're taking in and soaking up, whether it's on pitch or off pitch with analysis and everything else. Every time they step out and play a match, whether it's a training match or a full international, that experience of playing will only add to their talent and their game. And as you said, that confidence will come with it. You only grow into it, you'll learn the game a little bit more, and so it'll almost become easier to play the game, and therefore your confidence will grow with that. And look, we've a plethora of young stars coming through, and the future is very bright for Ireland, and it's so nice to be able to say that, because a couple of years ago we were in a very dire place.
Yeah, look, from the Irish setup perspective, we obviously have the reintroduction of the sevens players, which does change the game up a little bit. Again, we can mention Emily and the impact that she can have. But even, I suppose, on that kind of youth side of things, I do think it's easier probably in a team environment than as an individual athlete, because as you're watching the trajectory of athletes come up through, sometimes they play with a bit of like ease or compete with ease and just go out and do the very best. It's particularly if you're going in as an underdog, as a 16, 17, 18-year-old. But I think we see more struggles with young talent feeling pressure in an individual capacity maybe than a team, and interesting that you obviously mentioned Nicole and that potential of working together to develop. In terms of the Six Nations, we have just had the announcement for the Guinness Women's Six Nations Championship. So Ireland's head coach Scott Beamont has just unveiled 40 players for the squad, and we have 8 new entrants into the team, which is exciting. So the first game will be against France at King Khan Stadium on March 22nd. And we have a number of players that shone, I suppose, through the Celtic Challenge that have come up through AIL. One of them, Jane Clohessy, who only actually started playing rugby a couple of years ago, who was playing in the AIL for UL Bows, played Celtic Challenge, and is now one of the uncapped players that's in the squad. So talk to us a little bit about Jane and her journey and the excitement that's there. Yeah,
it's brilliant. She's one of a number of young players who've come through the youth setup that has actually been created over the last number of years. And my old teammate Katie Fitzhenry has kind of been right behind that. The likes of Larissa Muldoon, all former Irish internationals, have had a hand in developing these players, and I think that's really brilliant, because they're not only learning from really good coaches, but also from coaches who experienced what they've experienced, have been in that setup, know what these players will need to be able to deal with and expect and all the rest. And like, it's brilliant. Not just Jane. Jane's coming off an MCL, I think, injury as well. Like, you know, so for her, it's just really nice timing to come out the back of it and kind of get that going. And she's been starring for UL, as we mentioned. They've been kind of the best team in the league so far, in my opinion. But herself, Beth Butterver's done really, really well at hooker, which is brilliant because we need some more kind of front rowers to come through. Been really, really impressed by Katrina Finn as well. I watched a really good video of her kind of talking about the Celtic Challenge Cup and how like she's been in Irish setup since 15. So like for like, and I think she's only 18 or 19 now, maybe her first year senior. Like, feels not a very long time for us, but for her, I'm sure it's a long time coming. But like, the fact that we're recognising these young talents and we're giving them pathways and they get to play. Now there's the under-18 Six Nations, there's the under-18 Sevens tournament and under-20s as well. And like, it means that when they come into a senior setup now, they're not phased by it all. They have a little bit of experience. Yes, it's still a step up. You're at the highest level now. You know, there are players that have been around years and maybe have strength on you and all that experience, but it's bringing a freshness and it's bringing really good competition, and it means for us that we're setting ourselves up with good depth for the rest. Like for not just the next 2 or 3 years, whatever, but for the next maybe 1, 2, 3 World Cup cycles, you know, and it's brilliant. Look, Jane is the same as you said. Very similar story probably to myself in that didn't take up rugby too long ago and just kind of happened for her. You know, and while people just see her emerge and say, oh yeah, you know, she only picked up rugby and she just naturally had it, I'm sure she had to put in incredible graft and hard work. And rugby it's a great sport to play, but it's not exactly the easiest sport to play, you know. There's a lot of technicality going about it and there's a lot of skills and the laws and everything else, like, and you have to put in hard work if you make it to the international level, and it's brilliant for her and all these other youngsters coming through, you know, and they'll gain so much from being in a senior setup. Like, I'm not sure exactly how much game time an awful lot of them will get, but again, it is a huge year to be involved in, you know, just to be within that 40-man or 40-woman squad and learning and growing with the best players Ireland has to offer will only improve themselves, but also eventually add to our depth, and kind of just our overall standard will improve across the board.
But I think even what you're talking about there, the exposure, being in and around the players that, you know, might be the starting players on the pitch, but to get that exposure to the professionalism into the environment, it also will create like a hunger and a drive in some of them to push on. You mentioned, you know, Jane maybe having a similar story to yourself. Like, we know that she's come from Gaelic football, and we also do know that her dad previously played a bit of rugby as well. So how much one-to-one coaching do you think she's getting at home to develop as a player? Yeah, her dad would have played the odd bit of rugby here and there. But yeah, look, it's obviously great. I'm sure a really proud day for her and her family and everything else. And yeah, look, how great to have someone who has so much knowledge and experience of the game, like at home themselves. But I'm sure there hasn't been too much pressure or anything else like that. It reminds me of a story just very differently. Lucy Rock now came to rugby quite late as well from Gaelic football. Now, her family wouldn't have been big into rugby or whatever, but she owned a farm, and she told us that when she was first learning to tackle and all the rest, that she just used to go out and tackle the sheep and use it as an opportunity to practice her tackling skills. You know, so I can imagine Jane and her dad at the back practicing tackling here and there, and just it's great. It's a great like option to have someone that you're obviously very close to, that knows the game, understands the experiences you might be going through, and just give you a little bit of insight and advice. And like, obviously, as I said, such a proud day. Like, you know, any day that you get an opportunity to represent or be involved with a national squad is huge, you know. And as I said, there's many more years ahead for the likes of Jane and co. But I think what you're saying in terms of the rules of the game and the laws and all that kind of stuff, I think that's probably the stuff that he can, you know, really, really help give her maybe some notes on with that kind of development. And as you mentioned, like, you know, there are, you know, girls and women that are coming up through the programs that actually have been playing since they were kids. So it's getting tougher and tougher to, you know, make the switch to rugby that maybe in the past, you know, we did see more players coming from different sports. The likes of yourself, Eimear Considine, a couple others that were able to do that. Unfortunately, we will be without co-captain Sam Monaghan. How much of a blow is that to the squad, Hannah?
Yes, huge on and off the pitch, massive. Co-captain, probably one of our best forwards, particularly in an area, the second row, where we probably haven't quite got an awful lot of depth. You know, we've had to move the likes of Dorothy Wall in there, who primarily have been a back rower before that, and like the loss of Hannah O'Connor and stuff over the last couple of years has also kind of hit that. But yeah, she's huge. She's a phenomenal player since we kind of found her. You know, again, out with ACL, but just because she's not involved in the squad from a playing perspective, I can imagine she'll still have some input over the next couple of months, trying to teach some of the younger ones some of the tips. The likes of Ruth Campbell, I'm sure, can learn huge amounts from Sam, but her tenacity on the pitch, her ability to offload, the work she does in the scrum and around the loose is huge. And yeah, that'll be missed. But the thing is about injuries and stuff is it gives opportunities to other players, you know. And as I said, in a World Cup year where their jersey's up for grabs and you get a potential because unfortunately someone else is out, you can take that. Like, the only reason I personally think that I got my first cap is because Ashley Baxter bust her ankle a couple of months before the Six Nations, and I got an opportunity to develop and I got my start from there, you know. And that's just, it's sport, unfortunately, and someone else's downfall or, you know, a misfortune is another person's opportunity. So give someone a chance to show I'm good enough to play for Ireland, and you know, if Sam wants the jersey back, come get it.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying as well, I was going to ask that about her being in and around the squad, supporting in the background. Obviously, a co-captain role is a really, really important role. So it's not like she's not going to be involved in any capacity. She obviously will be, you know, pushing on for the team in whatever capacity she can offer at the time. And obviously, we wish her a speedy recovery, which we hope won't take too long. So moving on, I suppose, from the provincial and the Irish scene, we're going to now shift focus to the Energia AIL. When we last spoke, we would have been speaking around round 11. Now looking at we're now on round 13, so we'll take a look at round 12 and round 13. So Cook have swapped places with Ballincollig after beating the Cork side 29-17. There were also bonus point wins for Railway Union against Wicklow, UL Bohemians against Tullow, Blackrock College against Galwegians, and Old Belvedere against Suttonians. Hannah, talk to us, how important was that win for Cook on the 25th of January?
Huge for Cook, massive. If obviously points, huge bonus, lifts them off the bottom of the table, but I think the biggest thing for Cook is just the confidence boost and the morale boost to actually get a win. You know, for them, it's been a tough season, probably it's been a tough couple of seasons, and some games they've struggled to score, and there's been a couple of hefty defeats and stuff like that. So to get a win, and like a comfortable enough win in the end, you know, 12 points or so in the end, to score 29 points, huge for them. They've really struggled, and I'm really delighted. Their team that I kind of would definitely be rooting for in terms of the underdog, because they've had a lot of difficulties, and the collapse of Malone and stuff like that has had an impact on them as well, and the drainage of players, and so nice of them. On the other hand, for Ballincollig, not ideal, you know, they had a bit of a resurgence last year, but this year they just seem to be struggling a little bit. Again, with their depth and just some of their performances, making kind of silly little mistakes, and yeah, that would have been a disappointing loss, because both those teams definitely would have targeted that match up to try and get some points.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. We're going to get into round 13 shortly, but first we're going to take a look at who the Energia AIL captains think is the GOAT in rugby.
Greatest rugby player of all time, Portia Woodman. I think she has achieved so much in both the 15s and 7s game, and has kind of transcended the sport. So yeah, she's iconic.
Ashley Baxter. So she's just had a baby, Arabella, and I think Arabella's just turned 1, and then she played in the Olympics over summer. So just the comeback from playing rugby for years and then going off and having a baby, and to come back and being the first women in Ireland is just unreal.
Arguably pound for pound, I'd say Portia Woodman. When you look at accolades, you know, 7s, 15s, World Cups, individual accolades, players, you know, World Players of the Year, her try scoring ability, just her general play, I don't think you can kind of go wrong with her.
I'd say Lindsay Peat, the fact she's just been playing rugby for so long and she's still playing at a top level and just a standout player in the AIL.
And Michaela Glyde, I just think she's an absolute animal. If you watch her in 7s, like her work rate on the pitch and how she tackles and like her speed, her power, like she's just an absolute animal.
Portia Woodman, I think from New Zealand she's grown such like a culture in New Zealand for women's rugby, and then obviously both playing 15s and 7s, she's kind of taken it to a new level, and I think her along with a lot of the Black Ferns have kind of showcased women's rugby to the world.
Welcome back to the Her Sport Energia AIL show, brought to you by Energia. We have just covered round 12 and we're now going to take a look at the league table for round 13. In round 13, we have Railway versus Galwegians. We'll start off with that match. The game got called off and Galwegians were deducted 5 points for conceding the match. Galwegians have now lost their spot to Suttonians. What do you make of that, Hannah?
Yeah, look, obviously really disappointing at the end of the day. We want this league to flourish. We need games to be played. You know, players just want to go out and play a sport that they love and they enjoy. And the fact that Galwegians had to concede to what we think is not enough players it's just really disappointing. Look, a number of factors in it. Obviously, one of them probably being the Celtic Challenge and, you know, players being unavailable. The other, and I mentioned it in previous shows before, is just over the last number of years, Galwegians have just been hit by players moving away from the area for various different reasons, mostly work and college. And those players obviously finding it hard to travel back to Galwegians, so they moved to the likes of mostly Dublin clubs, Blackrock, Railway, you know, Old Belvedere, Suttonians and stuff like that. And it's just really disappointing. You know, I'm sure Galwegians are working really hard in the background to try and recruit new players, underage systems and all the rest, but that just doesn't happen overnight and it's really unfortunate. So hopefully they can rectify that and continue on the league in a more positive fashion.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we've talked about before, like the structure of women's rugby, you know, obviously in Ireland and then internationally, and you know, you're trying to give everyone the best opportunities, but like one of the biggest things is obviously ensuring that there's depth and the right underage structures in place. So we might dive into some of that a little bit later, but looking at UL Bows versus Wicklow, UL beat Wicklow 68-21, but it is important to note at half time here the score was 48-0 to Bows. So technically Wicklow won the second half 20 points to 21. They managed to get 3 tries and 3 conversions and make the second half a much more competitive match. Will Wicklow be happy with this performance? What do you think of that?
I don't know if you were to look at the scoreline outright and say, yeah, Wicklow could be happy with that, but definitely can be happy or impressed with their performance in the second half and the fight and determination they showed to just not be rolled over. Because a lot of teams at half time, you're down 48-0, you absolutely could be like, good luck, we're out of here, kind of head down and just wait for it to be over. But in fairness to them, they gave a really good fight back against a decent team in Railway, you know, and made it competitive in regards to that second half. They'll be really disappointed with their first half, and I can imagine any analysis they do, their focus is all on that and how to fix those little mistakes. On the other side of it, I'd say Railway are fairly disappointed, to be honest, to, you know, did they get complacent? Did they take their foot off the pedal a little bit and think the game was over and done with? You know, was there just, what was the thinking behind that? If I was a Railway coach, that'd be my kind of, we need to be ruthless and lethal and whatever team is put in front of us, no matter the scoreline, we just keep going. Because that's what will catch you out in the tighter games, the last kind of 10-15 minutes. So yeah, spirited kind of comeback, shall we say, to an extent for Wicklow, who have been a decent team this year. You know, a couple of surprise results from them, which is really good for the league, but it's still a 30+ point defeat that they'd be hoping to kind of rectify over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's something that we know, like Wicklow has obviously been putting in huge effort over the last number of years to keep building, and I think certainly a team to watch.
Still a very young club when you look at it, not very long in the league at all. So.
But learnings for everybody there, I think, you know, as we're saying, from both a Railway and a Wicklow perspective, certainly something to take away from that match and that performance. Would wonder what the half-time team talk was. Looking at Suttonians versus Tullow, the score was 17-0 with a win for Suttonians. Tullow are having a little bit of a hard time being used to the AIL. Obviously, it's going to take a couple of years for them to, you know, get their bearings and develop against some competitive teams that have been involved for a while. In terms of these kind of middle of the table matches, what do you think of the performance, I suppose, from the Tullow perspective, like only conceding 17 points, and I suppose the challenge that they seem to be facing at this point is actually getting the ball over the line and getting a score. But I suppose, what do you think the takeaway will be for both of those teams?
Yeah, look, obviously, I think anytime you go out, you want to go out and win, but definitely different teams will have different expectations depending on who they're playing. And for Tullow, as you mentioned, it's their first year in the league, you know, and they're doing a really good job to just stay banded together. They are learning every single match they play, regardless of the scoreline. They are learning so much about this level and where they need to be. And again, as I mentioned previously, that does not happen overnight. And they just need to be ensuring that every time they play, that they are learning from it and they are bringing that to the next game and trying to improve. And I think over the season we have seen some improvements. They've, you know, and I know this game ended up 17-0 and they didn't score, and that has been one of their biggest things, getting over the line. But for me, 17-0 17-0 against a good Suttonian side is actually a fairly decent result, you know, and I'm sure a lot of those players are like, well, we'd rather actually win the game or whatever else. But 17-0 compared to some of the other scorelines they've hit, this season, it shows little improvements. It might not show the scoreline for them in an attacking sense, but defensively it shows they've shored up a little bit. They are learning from past mistakes and they are bringing that to each and every game. And this season will stand to them so much. What they really, really need to do is whatever players are involved this year, they need to keep them to keep that learning, keep that growth, add new players next year to build their depth, and then hopefully they can really start to show on the scoreline what they can do in a more attacking position.
Yeah, like look, certainly after like in their first year in the competition, there's a lot of learnings that's going to come with it. So it will be exciting to see maybe where they go next year and the few years after. Yeah. As I said, like we want to see the league competitive. We're certainly seeing the development of different clubs around the country. So
and it's great to see a Midlands club. Like you know, again, we've loads of clubs in Dublin, we've a couple of other clubs around Ireland, but it is great to see a Midlands club, and hopefully, as I said, they can keep those players and start developing and bringing younger players through.
So that's a shout out to all the women that are on that team. Yeah, not moving anywhere. You have to commit to this for a few years to make it successful. So Old Belvedere faced Cook after their success in round 12 with a score of 56-3. Interesting because no substitutions were actually reported for Cook on IrishRugby.ie. And is it fair to assume that Cook might have been in a similar position to what the position that we think Galwegians might have been in, not having enough players? And if so, how do you think we overcome that challenge nationwide? As you said, players moving to Dublin, like they may not struggle with it as much as maybe some of the clubs in other parts of the country.
Yeah, look, again, disappointing result for Cook, particularly coming off the high of beating Ballincollig, to go down 56-3, I think it was, to Old Belvedere. It is a little bit of a hammering, unfortunately. Good for Old Belvedere, they've had a bit of an up and down season. They need some positive performances, but yeah, for Cook, no substitutions is very, very rare in rugby. It's so demanding, particularly on that front row, front five. And so, yeah, that would tell me that they just didn't have the players available for whatever reason. Probably the most frightening aspect from that is that Cook are the only team up in Ulster, which means that if they can't, get more than 15 players for one particular game, how many players are actually available to play up there, and what is going wrong that they're not getting people attracted and getting them down to play the game. When you have 5-6 counties, and look, I know a lot of places are quite far away from where Cook do train, but how do we fix that? How do we get more girls wanting to play rugby? How do we get more girls seeing their role models playing for Cook, playing for Ulster, playing for Ireland or the Clovers or the Wolfhounds, and say, I want to play, where's my nearest club? How do I get down there? It is a little bit frightening. If I was the RFU, would be something I'd be looking into and trying to see, can they help get some developments underage there going. Maybe the structures are there in place and it just unfortunately is going to take a little bit of time, but why is that? Why are we struggling with those numbers? Are the players again moving to the likes of Dublin or elsewhere and clubs aren't in a good proximity to them? But yeah, it's just unfortunate for Cook. As I said, they had that really good high of beating Ballincollig, and then they don't have barely enough players to play the game the following week. And fair play to the 15 that did play. It's no easy task to keep going.
Yeah. No, it is really interesting, like what you're talking about. Like we obviously saw, a team pull out from Ulster being involved in the AIL in the last year or so. So that was something that, we discussed and took note of at the time. But, completely agree. Like you do have to look at what the pathways, what are the structures, how you getting people into the teams. And then I do think we have to look a little bit beyond actually playing the game, and what are the supports that you can put in place around that to keep people playing up there, so that in the locality there are opportunities. So that might be housing, that might be job opportunities, that 100%. Might be sponsorship, like all of those things that can actually make a difference when we're trying to grow the game, because as you said, it'll have a knock-on effect into Ulster in the Interpros, which I think we've seen a couple of years like up and down performances from them. But it's not something, I suppose, from 4 provinces that we want to see one province where it's massively trailing behind. Like we want to retain competition in the Energia AIL, but equally in the Interpros as well. And then I know you've mentioned Ballincollig there. So Ballincollig took on Blackrock, and the score was 93-0 to Blackrock with the win. And on screen here we have Blackrock College captain Hannah O'Connor celebrating Maggie Boylan's 6th try performance against Ballincollig. That means that 30 points came from Maggie alone. So she's
just
now...
Just a six.
No big deal. So unsurprisingly, she's now at the top of the leaderboard for both points and top tries. Is it performances like this by Maggie that will have interprovincial and national coaches take notice of you and the performance that you're putting in? Because obviously 6 tries is no mean feat.
I don't think it'd be worth your weight as a coach if you're not going to look at someone who can score 6 tries in a match. And look, it's brilliant for Blackrock's, obviously brilliant for Maggie, fair play to her. But I suppose as well, coaches will also just look at, yes, you've scored those tries, how did those tries go about? And I think you have to look at the players' overall performance and teams' overall performance. Scoring tries is absolutely brilliant, and it looks great. Everyone wants to do it. But what else can you bring to the table with that? Because in some games, those same opportunities won't come to you. So how else can you help your team perform? But absolutely, any coach that doesn't sit up and take notice of someone who's scoring 6 tries and go, I might have a look at her over the next couple of games and see how we go, shouldn't be in the job. So I'm sure there are a couple more eyes on her over the next couple of games and see how we go. And it's obviously just a really nice feeling. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that your team wins. And Blackrock did that fairly emphatically. Tough couple of weeks for Tallon College.
With Blackrock, they're obviously playing competitively throughout the season. I know you mentioned UL Bows and their performance in the season as well. What do you think of, I suppose, the performance from Blackrock as we head into the latter half of the league? Are they someone that we should be taking notice of?
Yeah, definitely. Look, considering the performances, they're putting that in, remember, with an awful lot of players who are off at the Celtic Challenge Conference. So, and a lot of players not available to them. So to be able to put 93 points on a team, and you're still missing your superstars of your Aoife Wafer, your Baden Parsons, your Aoibhinn Riley and co, Maeve Deely, they're practically their whole backline with a couple of forwards in there. And you can never count out teams. On paper, there might always be one team that looks like they might dominate or should easily win, but that's the beauty of sport. You never really know, and some teams come good towards the end of a season and time it just right. And in knockouts and playoffs, anything can happen. So I wouldn't be counting Blackrock out anyway at all. They seem to be coming good just at the right time.
Yeah. So I suppose moving on from round 13, we're now going to take a look at what we can expect from the upcoming matches this weekend. So on Saturday the 15th February, we have Galwegians versus Suttonians at Crowley Park. We have Ballincollig versus UL Bows at Tanner Park. Cook versus Blackrock at Shaw's Bridge. Railway Union versus Tullow at Willow Lodge. And Wicklow versus Old Belvedere at Ashtown Lane. So with the matchups that we have there, Hannah, give us your top two matches that would excite you this weekend.
Wicklow, Old Belvedere definitely has to be up there. Two of them kind of battling for that 4th, 5th spot. Old Belvedere probably having a season that they wouldn't particularly be happy about. Some really good performances, but then some poor performances, particularly at the start of the year. And Wicklow have, they've been putting in some really good performances. I think there'll be a really nice battle there. That one would be my top pick anyway, definitely, for one that could be tight and could go either way. And both teams will need to be kind of on their best performance there to try and get a couple of points.
Super. Well, we wish everyone the best of luck, and look forward to seeing what the results are after this weekend. We obviously mentioned a couple other things that we were going to dive into following the Energia AIL updates. And at the start of the show, we looked at, I suppose, the story that's been unfolding in Fiji. The director of the Fiji Rugby Union was fired from her job just 4 days after being appointed to the role. And then for context, she stirred controversy following her remarks that homosexuality within the women's game was one big drawback, and that essentially there was a gay problem, which is something that she specifically said in the women's rugby space. I'm sure you saw it during the week. What was your reaction to this?
Yeah, look, really disappointed, obviously. As a member of the LGBT plus community anyway, comments like that are really disparaging and are not helpful in today's society, let alone in women's rugby, where we're trying to grow this game and get a wider audience. And I just think I don't understand why sexuality has to come into it. It's not going to affect how those Fijian women play their game, and it actually might have a negative impact because they now realise they don't have the support of their director of women's rugby, and some of them might decide, well, I don't want to play for Fiji anymore, and that can have an impact, taking away an opportunity for them. And for people who don't know, rugby in Fiji is life. It's everything, sevens in particular, but 15s game as well. It's such a huge honour to get to play for your country. Everywhere you go in the streets, rugby is all they do. And for the director of women's rugby to have those remarks, it's just it just puts women's rugby in such a negative spotlight. And for, as I said, a country is so passionate about the sport, you know, comments like that, and they don't need to be said. You can have your own beliefs and what you think and your religion and everything else, but it shouldn't be allowed to affect the workplace and then the players that you're involved with.
I think looking at maybe the discourse online, like there was also criticism about a lot of other things that maybe resulted in Fiji, not performing at the levels they had performed at previously. So it seemed, completely bizarre that this was a comment that came out from the director, as opposed to maybe focusing on the, actual things that are holding them back from the performance. So I know that the discourse online has obviously been in outrage to the comments, which I'm sure is unsurprising, because I think in terms of the women's sports space, it is very supportive of people from LGBTQ community, and we see, I suppose, a lot of relationships within football, within rugby, within a couple of other sports. So the keyboard warriors are out in defence of this.
I think just particularly women's sport has been widely known to be so accepting of and so inclusive of everybody and anybody, regardless of sport, particularly rugby. GAA for me is same soccer as well, but it's just not necessary and it's just not needed. And I hope that the Fiji Rugby Union can obviously deal with this and kind of get their players back on board, and hopefully something like this never happens again. Just no need for it.
Like what you obviously mentioned, like the women's sports space there, like as a whole, and I think that's something that actually, from a women's sports perspective, particularly rugby, football, Gaelic games, we can actually look at the pride of all of the support there, because it's not something that we actually often see reflected in the men's game.
No, absolutely not. And it's such a huge positive, the women's game, regardless of religion, gender, race, sex, ethnicity, sexuality. You are welcomed, you are involved. It's such an open space. It's why I'm so pro sport, and I encourage everybody to join. And you don't see it in the men's side, and we don't need negative remarks like that coming in and preventing women from playing, preventing women from being who they are. And we want the best people both playing and kind of managing and surrounding and getting involved in it, and marks like that just don't do it justice.
In terms of the appointment itself, I know we spoke about this off air a little bit. So she made these comments in an interview, which is obviously public domain. So that's not something, it was like completely public, not spoken about behind closed doors. In terms of the actual process to hiring somebody into that position, how do you think due diligence is managed by the sporting bodies? Is it a poor process? Which is probably more common in the women's game at this point, because we're still working on professionalising systems, putting the right investment and everything behind it? Or do you think it's actually a difficult thing to be a sporting body in this instance, because are we supposed to have this big long list of questions that we're like asking somebody in an interview, like, so what are your thoughts on this and what are your thoughts on that?
It's very hard. It's very, very hard, because I can imagine that it's not quite at the forefront of the board's mind, or whoever's kind of interviewing these around, like, they're hardly going to just ask right out, are you homophobic, or what's your kind of thoughts on
put that into an interview?
Like, you would hope that doesn't need to be something that is questioned. And particularly, I suppose, with Fiji seen as a tier 2 nation, shall we say, with rugby, I don't know if their women are actually professional yet, so therefore what are the funds that are going into this interviewing process? And in terms of applicants, like, what was the range of applicants that they had available to them, and all of that will have an impact and an influence on how they, I suppose, figure it out. But look, they just didn't quite get it right in the end. Like, again, as I mentioned, I'm all for everybody having their own views and different beliefs and all the rest, but it's when you make it public and when you let that impact the job that you're doing, and it will impact the players that are involved, then it's something that obviously needs to be recognised and stopped and dealt with. And Fiji did, obviously, but damage had been done by that point.
I suppose it's not the first time that we've actually seen something like this rear its head in the last I suppose year to 18 months. Don't quote me on the exact date. But I know you've mentioned there that, like, Fiji, we don't know, and we'll have to check in terms of the professionalism of that country and that team. And we know that, I suppose, in women's rugby, that there is a more professional environment coming about for both countries and clubs. we have seen similarities in this type of conversation, I suppose, from Emma Hayes, as I said, last year or in the last 18 months, where there has been, I suppose, discussion about relationships within the team, and obviously relationships don't always work out, and essentially if you are a professional player, you're going to work, you have to work with the people that are on your team. So if you look at it in a professional sense, where in some other jobs, maybe not in a sporting sense, like there are relationships and sometimes you have to disclose that, you're in a relationship with somebody or not. In that case, how is that something, do you think, that we can, I suppose, ensure that the women's sporting space is still obviously very supportive of relationships and gay relationships within the sport, but also from a professional sense that the team is managed, and maybe if somebody does break up, it obviously doesn't, fester within the team. It's probably reasonable that policies and procedures are actually going to have to come into the professional environment in some capacity.
Yeah, definitely. Look, it is a very tricky one, obviously, that again probably hasn't come up in the men's space at all, if ever. And so something new that, you're right, if policies do come in place, they will have to be carefully worded, carefully thought about, lots of discussions and negotiations about how you approach this, because at the end of the day, it is a private relationship. But again, as you say, if that is in a team environment, and it can have a massive impact if things aren't going right. And I suppose that's down to the players that are involved, and then the coaches and management and whatever else, just sitting down and having discussions. And look, as someone, if I was a player in that position involved with another player in a relationship, I would hope that we both, myself and whoever that partner would be professional enough to understand that, yes, we have a relationship, but we cannot under any circumstances allow that to affect our game and allow that to affect the team environment, because that's not fair and that's not the reason we're here for. And so I've obviously been very lucky that I've never had to hide a relationship in any regard, but that I would always make sure that it stayed on that kind of private realm while within a working environment, shall we say, and that hopefully everybody around could understand that, respect that, and it wouldn't affect our team environment, because at the end of the day, then it does become a problem, and you can understand why that might be an issue. But yeah, any policies around that, it is a tricky one, because we never come really across it. And I think Emma Hayes was right to have questions about it, and kind of how do we deal with that a little bit, because again, she is a coach, she is being judged on performances and results, and if there's stuff going on in the background that's affecting results and affecting players' performance and everything else, that's part of her remit, unfortunately, so it has to be dealt with.
I do think, though, it's not new.
No, it's been around for a very long time.
But as in, workplace relationships is not a new concept at all, and we have had the conversation internally about in the type of sporting environment and going out to be the very best that you can, and it can be, I suppose, a lot more can feel like it's on the line sometimes in a sporting sense when that is your job, going out to play for your country or compete for your country, than maybe day-to-day operations in an organisation. But workplace policies around that, they're not new. They need to go and just speak to people that have already put the policies in place. It's just, as you said, something that is actually, well, at least new to
coming to light, shall we say, with social media. And
it's possibly within an athletics team structure or a swim team structure or something, but now we're seeing it happen in the pitch sports. And so it is just getting the advice, and we've obviously seen plenty of players that have been in relationships that haven't worked out, and they, as you said, they show up to work in a professional capacity, do their job, and ensure that it doesn't affect their job in that sense. So it's an interesting I suppose evolution, but it's as we professionalise women's sports more, that's where we're going to see it maybe discussed. But I don't think, obviously, we're discussing the Fiji situation here.
Slightly different.
Her comments were not something that anybody endorses, and her appointment has been redacted, or she has been removed from the position. I suppose in a more positive sense, and with and more evolutions of the game, we're looking at the first professional women's rugby league launched in America, which is going to kick off next month, and 6 teams have been announced. So we'll have the Bay Breakers, Boston Banshees, Chicago Tempest, Denver Onks, New York Exiles, and TC Gemini. So what do you think of the new league, the creation of professional opportunities?
It's brilliant. Anytime we see a new league anywhere around the world that's providing more opportunities and more growth for women's rugby, it's fantastic. From an Irish perspective, number one, there's opportunities for maybe girls. Not that we want it, to go off and play and experience a different league, a different culture for a while. But from an international perspective, it's quite scary because the depth that the US have in terms of athletes,
generally,
and the potential they have just to build a team if they really tap into rugby. You know, they could be a powerhouse over the next 10 years or so if they really got their act together, invested, you know, got the thousands of athletes who, you know, wanted to be Olympic sprinters but just quite aren't fast enough purely because of the numbers they have to switch to rugby. Like they've done really, really well in sevens, like the Celtic coming over from ice hockey and a load of others from soccer and hockey and all the rest. It could be very, very scary for them. They really have an untapped... Well, yeah, sorry. They really have an untapped resource of players over there with rugby, and you know, it's still quite a niche sport over there, and they've just so much potential. But look, anytime any league is put up and it becomes professional, it gives the opportunity for players to actually better themselves and grow their game and develop is huge. So it'll be brilliant, and hopefully it's long lasting and durable and provides us with some really, really good games, and then overall some good players that we'll see on the international stage.
Yeah, I think, like as you said, like rugby isn't one of the top sports in the States by any means, but they obviously had, you know, strong performances in the seven sense at the Olympic Games. I suppose it'd be interesting actually to see what happens with that league in terms of, will we see it filled by mostly American players? Could we see Ilona Maher going back and take
just about to say, all you need is for one of those teams to sign Ilona Maher, and you will get uptake. And that is crazy. One player can change the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing is, like we're talking about the American, you know, athletes that might transition, or the players, like they obviously have depth and players on the 7th and 15th side playing anyway. But also the opportunities that it presents to an international audience, because we've obviously seen Ilona come and play in the UK. Could we see UK players, Irish players, French players go and try throw their name in the hat to get those opportunities? I suppose brings us on maybe to a little bit of what we were talking about off camera, and looking at the AIL and the implications that you know, other tournaments can have. Is this, like you mentioned a player earlier that is gone and moved over to play in the Premiership in the UK, is this something that we should be looking at domestically as a threat? How do we deal with it in ensuring that we have people playing here domestically being the best rugby players that they can be, and we also have a really, really strong league here, and you know, people available to play, the Celtic talents, like all of those kind of things. Like it's an interesting one, because I think, as we said earlier, like the biggest thing that we need in this country and in lots of countries with women's rugby is the depth.
Look, it's huge. Obviously, the Energia AIL over the last couple of seasons has been revamped, and we want our best players playing domestic rugby here in Ireland. Unfortunately, our biggest drawback right now compared to the likes of the Premiership and what will be in the US is that we're not professional. Yes, we have centralised contracts from an Irish perspective. Yeah. However, if you're a player that maybe is just not quite reaching those heights, and you get an opportunity to play in the Premiership or to play in the US, like, why wouldn't you go? Yeah. And it is a threat, absolutely.
We've obviously seen players that are in the Irish squad, you know, reject maybe some contract offers to be on those central contracts, as you said, because the financial opportunities and arguably in some senses the competitive opportunities of playing the rugby game is of a higher standard in the UK, which makes it's an interesting discussion, because obviously you see that happen in some sports. In the Irish men's rugby sense, we don't see it. People play here.
But the reason the men don't play abroad is because it removes their eligibility to play for Ireland. Yeah. If we had that rule here, I would say that 90% of the players that are playing in the UK would be back in Ireland. However, we would be doing them a disservice purely from a monetary point of view. You should be available to go and make the money you can make. At least the lads here in Ireland are making a very decent wage, and they don't have to worry about other bills and mortgages and everything else. Like, most of these players have jobs outside of rugby, you know, and so that is a very difficult thing to do.
Because I think you see it in other sports, like when you're looking at the Irish women's football team, like the only, I'm pretty sure the only player that we had domestically set up here in the League of Ireland was Julianne Russell. Yeah.
And for her own personal reasons, because probably could have played in the Championship or in the WSL over there, like with opportunities if she wanted to.
So I think like we obviously see that. We see you know, swimmers going off and being involved in different universities and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose men's rugby in Ireland is a little bit unique in that sense. We obviously have the interprovincial, but we'll call them club teams of the provinces there. Do you think that's a good structure? Do you think it's something that, from a long-term perspective, within Irish rugby, they should be looking at seeing if we can replicate that and emulate that here for the women's programme? It's not something we can obviously change over 2 or 3 years, because the financing that needs to go into it is just phenomenal.
The funding is the biggest drawback, and that obviously it would be ideal that we could keep all players here playing in domestic league, improve our grassroots, improve our underage structures, have the best players playing as role models, knowing they could still get opportunities to play for Ireland here, and it be a really good standard, because all of our best players are playing here, and we'd probably get other international players wanting to come here, and moving into that interprovincial structure absolutely would be ideal, but the funding is probably going to make that
the biggest thing. It's so
nigh on impossible, like, you know, and it would need massive amounts of investment, and it would need us to take a loss for a very long time in order to fund that, which feasibly right now it's just not possible. I'd love it. It would be ideal. Obviously, who doesn't want to go and watch Old Belvedere versus Railway and have 2 absolutely smashing teams, like, you know, full of internationals going at it, and every single game being a hugely competitive structure of the best players in the league. We're just not there right now, and I believe that girls should be able to go off and get opportunities elsewhere. But of course, I'd rather them have to play in the Energia AIL. So yeah,
it's interesting. And look, obviously from the evolution of the game, and you know, as we talked about earlier, some of those players actually playing over in the UK, like they're getting the opportunities to hone and develop their skills, and maybe coming back into Irish camps. But equally, it is opening up those opportunities, albeit we've mentioned some of the challenges with some specific teams, but there's lots of other teams that there's a lot of people getting game time, and we've obviously mentioned, you know, the likes of Jane earlier, who has come through that system in UL Bows, and you know, up to Celtic Challenge, and up into being drafted for the Six Nations. So I suppose it is
2 sides to it, I suppose, and it's very hard.
Position. So moving on to that, one of the last topics of today, in terms of the world of behind the scenes documentaries. I don't know if you're watching the newest iteration of Sprint, which is out, the behind the scenes action of athletics at the Olympic Games. But Leinster have just released the first episode of their 5-part docu-series, which follows the Leinster women's rugby team throughout the 2024 interprovincial series. As a women's sports media company, obviously that's something that excites us. We love to see organisations and teams taking initiative to do this, to give more exposure to the game. It gives that visibility, it gives that role modelling of the female players. We haven't seen, to be fair, that much of it across other docu-series that have been created. So what do you make of this as a creative strategy from Leinster?
I think it's brilliant. It's something new and exciting. It's a background to the game probably we've never seen, and a lot of people wouldn't really understand what actually goes into playing for Leinster. And as I mentioned, all of these players, bar a few, are they're amateurs to an extent, but they don't train like amateurs, and that documentary is going to show you just how much hard work, time, effort, graft goes into it, the learnings behind it, you know, how the likes of Tanya Rosser likes to coach, and you know, the interaction with the players. You also get more of an insight into like the personality of some players and who they are as human beings as opposed to just rugby players, and it's nice. It's something we've never really seen before from a women's perspective, and I can't wait to watch more.
In other news, we had the Her Sport Awards presented by Lidl recently, and just newly retired Eimear Considine won Personality of the Year, which is an incredible achievement for her. So Personality of the Year sponsored by AIL. I suppose she had a really open and frank discussion about how difficult it was to make that decision to retire coming into a World Cup. And I think one of the things that I was delighted that she actually discussed was that challenge with you know, the contracts that are on the table, having a family, having a mortgage. I know that's something that you can relate to in some sense. So would you mind sharing a little bit about that? You know, it's a journey we're on, but for Eimear, a difficult decision where she had to put her family and their future first.
Yeah, look, similarly enough, back in 2020, when I decided to step away from sevens after failing to qualify for Tokyo, I basically said I want to give 15s a really good shot and try qualify for the World Cup that was meant to be on New Zealand 2021. I trained with the team for a while, and unfortunately COVID started to delay things a little bit, and we were amateur at the time, so we hadn't actually professionalised yet. So I was full-time teaching in a brand new school that I just started that year, and it was coming off the back of 7 years of being a semi-professional rugby player. So it was my first, let's say, proper kind of full-time job in the real world, shall we say.
Finally made the move.
Yeah, and you know, I was getting a little bit older at that point, and you know, I was turning 30 that year and due to be married, and had all these plans for, you know, my career after rugby, and I had to start planning for that and paying bills and all the rest. And the World Cup was pushed out by a year, and I'd planned to retire after it, and I just really struggled with the financial side of how am I going to hold down a full-time job that I wasn't sure was actually going to be there next year. With teaching, you have to kind of re-interview, and also then need all this time off. And again, teaching is known to have no flexibility really when it comes to trying to take time off. And I had
Unless everything's happening in the summer, it's pretty tough.
Look, you know, we work hard for those summers. But you know, for me, just I had to kind of weigh up, how do I pay my mortgage and take all this time off school and take this unpaid leave, and can I commit to the demands of another year of international rugby and travel and everything else that goes with it? And ultimately, I obviously had another goal of wanting to go back to Dublin GAA and other amateur sport, but I just ultimately felt that for me at the right time was to step away from Irish rugby and concentrate on a career that was going to have much longer lasting consequences. And I knew I had to pay bills. I knew that eventually we wanted children, and unfortunately as a gay couple that doesn't come cheap. And there were other things, you know, that I had to think about other than just getting to play sport. And obviously I wish it had been different, you know, but that's the decision I made, and I'm very comfortable with that. And you know, Eimear had similar challenges, so she obviously then had a kid by that point, and so, you know, throw that into the mix. She also just started a new teaching job not too long ago, and you know, it's just not as easy when you have other aspects to think about, the financial side of things, the time commitment when you have a family, what's your priorities now. And when you become a parent, your responsibilities change a little bit, and you can't just be, you know, going off to tournaments for every 3 or 4 weeks and living the life. As amazing as playing international rugby is, there just comes a time when you have to do what you feel is best for you, your family and your future. And Eimear, you know, she felt comfortable in that decision as much as I did.
Yeah, no, look, it is I suppose it's an interesting kind of change the tide that we're going through at the moment, where, you know, unfortunately that wasn't an option for you to, you know, play rugby professionally and be able to afford the lifestyle and the life that you and your partner obviously envisioned. And it's similar for Eimear, and look, she has said she is comfortable with the decision that she made, but I suppose it's acknowledging, you know, where we need to aim to be getting to, so that we can retain, you know, female athletes in the game, and it's not obviously just rugby that we're talking about. Interesting point that you mentioned that you went back to play football with Dublin, because that's obviously an option that could be there for Eimear. She's back living in Clare. She played Camogie before, and she played football before.
She did.
So I would say we'll asterisk this and say watch this space. But yeah, if you haven't seen the interview already, it's up on the YouTube channel now. And I just thought it's great to be frank about these things, because I think we need to talk about it. We need to make sure that people understand, and that we can target, you know, getting to a position where we can retain athletes to be involved. So that's pretty much it from the episode. The last thing that I am going to mention is in relation to the Her Sport Awards Community Awards, sponsored by Energia, where Heather Jemison took the win this year. A fantastic story, so definitely tune in on our YouTube channel to watch that. Other than that, keep up to date with the other AIL Energia news on the Her Sport platforms across the board, and we look forward to seeing you next time.